Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the City Council regular meeting for the City of Newcastle. It is Tuesday, October 18. It is 7 p.m. Will you please rise and join me in the flag salute? All right, City Clerk White, will you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
Here.
Councilmember Griffin.
Here.
Councilmember Villasenor.
Here.
Councilmember Lakota.
Here.
Councilmember Charbonneau. Councilmember Clark. Mayor Newing.
Here.
7 present, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All are present tonight. Are there any objections to approving the final agenda? Hearing none, agenda is approved. Public comment. I do want to mention before I open the public comment a couple of things. First of all, we will have a special public comment section for our public hearing tonight, which is on the 2023 preliminary budget. In addition to that, City Manager Pingle will be giving an update on the slurry seal project in the Newport Woods, Hazelwood area during his city manager report, which is coming up under item number 7. So if you had comments about that, he does have a fair amount of more information on that project. And with that, I will go ahead and open the public comment. Residents have, or actually speakers, have 3 minutes to speak. And please state your name and the neighborhood in which you reside. And with that, Tam Kameen is our first speaker, general speaker.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Tamara Kameen, and I live in the Olympus neighborhood. And I just have a couple of quick items, quick general items. The first one is just to say that I'm quite disappointed that it's been almost 6 weeks that we've been flying an outdated banner in the middle of our city that talks about the Newcastle days that we already had. And I don't think it reflects well on our city. It's outdated. I would encourage you to get something in place to get rid of that as soon as possible. I've seen other cities that have delayed that, and it always gives me a bad taste in my mind. So I would encourage you to do that. Second item is I see that there's a discussion on the Community Development Committee in the agenda today. I highly approve of that item. I think it would be a great idea to get that going again. We kind of lost steam on it a couple of years ago and decided we wouldn't have a representative, but I think now is a good time to bring that back. Councilmember Charbonneau has suggested that perhaps a couple of us former council members could meet with Mark and talk a little bit about what that looked like before. But I think that would be great to reinstitute that. It's a way to support our businesses and to even hopefully generate a little revenue, maybe find out what the holdup is on the old Starbucks location. So anyway, I'm very in favor of that, and I'm even more in favor of City Manager Pingle's dashboard that he's going to put together. He has an item there on the agenda. I think that's a great one where you could show how we're doing as a city, and the citizens could monitor that, and if they have concerns, they can look and see where we are. I think that's a wonderful task that you put on your list, and I would just like to commend you for that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mike Blodgett.
Mike Blodgett, Newport Woods. Your comments before, Mayor, about Mr. Pringle doing the slurry summary, I guess, is really why I came, because I want to know how it's going to be published. How can the community members get that information that we're going to hear later? And because we don't know what's going on. They came and swept, they left signs up for 3 or 4 days and then walked away. Nothing really changed. It hasn't gotten smoother. And is there a timeline for this to be fixed? Thank you. I'll wait for the comment.
Thank you, Mr. Blodgett. Dave Otteson, I probably butchered your name, and for that I apologize.
Hello, my name is Dave Otteson. You did it right. You can help me, though. I don't know where I live. You know, my neighborhood, at the bottom of the hill where it turns and the old fire station that's now a home, what's that neighborhood called?
It's like 112th area?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, I'm in the 112th area. I came here to speak for just a moment about the false alarm ordinance that we have in Newcastle related to, I guess, when a security service calls the police and they come to the house and there really wasn't a break-in. In my case, it was about 2 weeks ago and I was out of state. And I got a call from my security telling me that my alarm was going off. Well, I was in Oregon, so they asked me if I wanted them to call the police. I said, I guess that's how the service works. What else are you gonna do? I didn't know it was a false alarm until I, later learned that nobody was breaking into my house. But when I got home, there was a notice on my door like this, and it announced to me that the police were there. Thank you, appreciate that. In an effort to reduce false alarms, a notice of invoice will be sent and it must be paid within 30 days. So the feeling for me was the bad guys didn't rob me, but my city was gonna rob me. So I'm just bringing this up. I think maybe there's a better way of doing this. I don't know what it is. I'd be willing to sit and talk to somebody about it if they wanted to. But I wanted to just push back a little bit on this ordinance and hope that you will consider maybe a different way of dealing with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Otteson. Okay, are there any virtual attendees with their hands raised? Okay, I will go ahead and close the public comment. All right, moving on, council comment. Council member Villasenor, you want to kick it off?
All right, thank you. October in the state of Washington is Filipino American Heritage Month. I'm proud that the state of Washington has instituted this, as I am a proud member of the Filipino American community. In a little bit of digging today, I found out that the first Filipino actually set foot in North America on this date in 1587. So Filipinos have been part of our country since its inception. Filipinos have always had a very strong culture of family and food, and I hope that all of you get a chance to experience that at some point in your life. And I know that we have many Filipinos and Filipino families living in Newcastle, and I'd like to celebrate this month alongside them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lakota.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. Thank you for the public comments, and thank you to our citizens who've been writing to us. Please keep writing to us. That's a great way of communicating to the city as to what we are doing right and things that we are doing wrong. You will get update on the slurry project, and hopefully, hopefully we'll be able to resolve this issue soon. It's been going on for a while. Couple of things we are going to discuss today in the council, and I would encourage all of you to just sit back and stay for as long as you can. We have public and safety issue that we are going to discuss. We have a very important budget that we will be discussing today. Please pay close attention to what numbers you're going to see. We have been talking about the budget for a while now, and you will see a doom and gloom story here. Our budget is not balanced, and you will hear about how we are falling short of revenue and how expenses cannot be reduced and things so on and so forth. So do ask questions. Do ask things like, what services are essential and why are the expenses going up? Or, what services can be compromised, or which other non-essential services can we get a breakout of services and expenses, so that we can see, where we can cut expenses. So ask questions like those, and please pay close attention to our budget. Other than that, I want to thank our volunteers, our teen volunteers here in Newcastle. Every month, they have been conducting, programs for our seniors in our community in the Newcastle Library, and they just did one last weekend. So thank you to our teens. That's a great way to engage intergenerationally with our seniors and, train them and have fun with them. So that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. Keeping the public hearing in mind, I'll keep it short. Ballots are being mailed by King County elections tomorrow. Please vote. Please encourage the rest of your family to vote, and vote in every single race, including initiatives. And please make your voice heard.
Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. On the table over there, you'll see a flyer. Looks like this. There'll be a short Veterans Day service. I'll be leading that on Friday, November 11th. So we haven't had one in Newcastle for, well, longer than I've lived here, I think, a very long time. So I don't know what the attendance will be like. I hope it's good. Come on out, pay some respects to veterans. We'll have a little flag changing ceremony and a little couple presentations to go along with that. Also on November 6th, which is the week before Veterans Day, many of you perhaps may have gone to the Auburn Veterans Day Parade. Keep that in mind. That's an outstanding event. It's the largest parade west of the Mississippi, so very entertaining and interesting if you get a chance to go down to that. That's all from me.
All right, Councilmember Griffin.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. Thank you, folks, for showing up tonight. It's nice to have people out there looking back at us so that we know that somebody really cares. I have a couple of items tonight regarding the slurry project. Sweeping the slurry into submission has proved to be unacceptable, and patching efforts leave considerable to be desired. Hopefully this will be taken care of soon. Second, the budget process for the city of Newcastle has been set in motion. The council's first budget meeting was held on August 27th with very little progress being made. The finance director brought a budget which showed a deficit of $1.1 million and announced this budget has no cuts in it. For the year of 2022, except for the ARPA funds, we were budgeting to a deficit of $881,000. In my first meeting with the city manager, I was told the city had certain expenses that they had to meet in order to remain a city. I explained to him that the council and the citizens need to know what those expenses should be in order for the council to move forward with a plan for sustainability. I was told this would be prepared. Hopefully this will be available for the council's budget meeting on Saturday, October 22nd. 2 years ago, the citizens were asked to approve a utility tax, and the citizens didn't believe that the city was being operated efficiently and chose to vote the tax down 59 to 41%. I, as a CPA, need to tell you this council must face the facts. Our city is in danger of going bankrupt. In order to prevent this from happening, we, the council, must do our jobs and reduce expenses to bring them more in line with our revenues. This, folks, is the reason that we were elected. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
No comment, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, that brings up reports. My report tonight, I got a phone call from Councilmember Reagan Dunn's office last week, and we were the recipients of a flood control reduction grant, and what was the amount again? Yeah, that's what I thought, $750,000 grant. I didn't write down the amount. Okay. Other than that, I don't have anything, so I will turn it over to, let's see here, Director Bronze.
What would you like, Madam Mayor?
Oh, well, I have on here your report, your.
Oh, it's just, it's
CIP,
attached, I wasn't
just-
planning to speak to it, I've been happy to
Okay.
entertain any questions. It's attached to City Manager Pingle's report, but happy to entertain any questions for the CIP update.
Yeah. Any questions for Director Bronze? Caught you off guard, sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Way to stay on your toes. Council
Yeah,
committees.
It worked.
Council committees, Finance Committee.
Finance Committee, we went through some of the steps from Finance Committee, our last meeting. Our next Finance Committee is next week on the 29th. Thank you.
All right, 29th of October already. Salary and Benefits Committee has not met. Regional committees, any regional committee updates? Councilmember Clark, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. Just really quick, Metropolitan Solid Waste Advisory Committee met on Friday, once a month. There's usually not a lot to talk about, but they're rolling out a significant recycling program called RePlus. You can read about it on their website, and Director Bruns and I were talking previously. We'll try to find a time when they can present that to us as a city, because they're going around the region representing to local councils, so how we can all be involved. So, of course, recycle all the time anyway. Thank you.
All right, and I just have a Public Issues Committee brief update. We met on Wednesday, and it was, a lot of updates on some county work that's being done, like on behavioral health crisis, climate change and comprehensive planning, legislative priorities, and the Regional Homelessness Authority's 5-year plan. Nothing in-depth and no voting. And City Manager Pingle, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things to point out. We should be getting our restaurant relief grant. So it's $25,000. It was, it's through Councilmember Reagan Dunn's office. This was ceremonially presented to the city in July of last year, but they've been working through process since then, and they just now let us know that the money's coming through, and so we should be receiving that. And then just a couple of things on the slurry seal. Wanted to update. So city staff continue to work with the contractor to address punch list items. That includes same things you've heard about before: large aggregate, spot patching, and then resealing of the pock marks along 125th. Some of that, as far as the fixes, will have to happen as they come back next year, because we're past the weather window. Staff met with the president of Doolittle Construction last Wednesday to discuss the poor quality of workmanship. The contractor is committed to working with the city to address the concerns that we have. City staff still believe that the use of slurry seal is an appropriate and prudent maintenance technique. It's really up to the community and the council to determine whether that's desirable. And unless directed otherwise by the city council, staff intend to continue to use this method in the future, taking lessons learned from this project. So we certainly want to acknowledge that there are many locations of poor workmanship with this project. The work performance is not, however, to the level of a failed project. And so the city at this point does not intend to repave the slurry sealed portions of road. And just wanted to, I guess, point out that there's, I try to clarify between what an appropriate or prudent pavement management technique versus what may be desired or dictated. And so with this project, city staff will continue to work the project until we can get to a final stage, unless directed otherwise.
Thank you. And City Manager Pingle, I just wanted to make a note that this meeting is recorded and it is available to the public, and that is, what City Manager Pingle just provided as an update would be available on that recording. Okay, consent agenda. Is there any objection to approval of tonight's unanimous consent agenda as presented? Okay, if not, please show the consent agenda approved as presented. All right, this brings us to the next item on the agenda is a public hearing on the 2023 preliminary city budget. We will open the public hearing, receive a staff presentation, followed by council member questions. Then the floor will be opened for public testimony. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to testify during the hearing, please add your name to the sign-up list now, and if you haven't done so already, and we will call your name when it's your turn to speak. I do have one so far. After testimony, there will be an opportunity for council member comments, after which we will close the public hearing and proceed to motions. Are there any questions about the order for the public hearing? Oh, it would actually be council, I believe. Yeah.
So we did check to see what we were able to see on the stream coming through YouTube. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there was volume. The Zoom meeting. So thank you for clarifying. I will say that we recognize that it is an unavoidable deficiency in the Zoom setup when interfaced with the rest of our tech, that the Zoom meeting experience is not a very good one. So you don't necessarily get to see council. You should be able to hear, however, what's going on. Okay. Well, that is, so the Zoom interface is the only way we have right now for people who are not present physically to comment during our council meetings, and that's why we do it, because the technology is not the best way for people to participate in the meeting. So we do provide it so that people who are not able to come to City Hall can still provide their comments. Thank you for clarifying that it's that the experience was specifically on the audio in Zoom, and we'll look into it some more to make sure that see what we can find out about that.
Okay, the public hearing is now open. It is 7:23 p.m. Yes.
So before we take public testimony, I want to highlight a few things. The 2023 budget, preliminary operating capital budget, is made available through an electronic version. It's the second year that we've done this electronically, the first year being last year. This particular electronic version is different than the last one, which was at the budget retreat. The first one was designed to provide a very high-level summary of revenues. 5 years ago, I expanded that to include expenditures, and that was the first year that was ever done. So we've improved that by considerable by showing both of the revenues and the expenditures. So it's high level. This particular preliminary budget has a lot of detail in it, and if you for the public, if they go to the section that's called the operating capital budget, they can see that detail drilled down by departments, both for the general fund as well as the remaining operating funds and capital funds. The back portion of the budget has a lot of detail about the capital components, but most people are interested in the operation portion of the budget. And then we have a narrative that is done by this city manager and myself. It's called the budget message. That has a lot of information in it, and we highlight the fact that the general fund, which is the chief operating fund of the city, has the majority of the operations in it. The other funds are streets and the swim fund, and this year, the cumulative reserve fund, because we have expenditures coming out of that as well for this year, and also the internal service funds, which include IRF, Equipment Rental Fund, and Facilities Fund. So transparency is a big piece by moving to this. 3 of the council members, one is still present here, voted for that transparency last year. And so we provided that through that's what we call ClearGov. So the testimony tonight is just to receive comments, and then we will have a workshop on Saturday starting at 8:30. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Director Palmer, Council? All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead with the public testimony. I do have one signed up so far. Tam Kameen, go ahead, please. Please state your name and neighborhood in which you reside, and you will have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I am still Tamara Kameen from Olympus, and I have sent my comments on the budget to the city manager, the city clerk, and the council as of last night. Don't know if everyone has seen it. I have heard from a couple of you. So I just wanted to emphasize a couple of things in there and add a little bit more detail. And what I said was I had 2 major concerns on the budget. Number 1 concern is at this point in the budget process, we are still $946,000 underwater, where our revenues are less than our expenditures. That's my first concern. The second concern is that in my experience of listening to conversations, looking at the budget and listening to the retreat, most of the focus has been on revenue and not on controlling or reducing our expenditures. And as Councilmember Griffin said in his council comments, he said that in 2020, we had a vote of the citizens on a utility tax, which increases revenue. And our citizens, 59% of our citizens said, no, this is not the time. And the message was, we want to see spending controlled before we give you more money. And so since that time, I believe that we haven't seen a lot of spending control. There have been a few bits and pieces, but it hasn't seemed to be serious, in my opinion. Now, I've worked in the private sector a lot. I've been in leadership roles, and leadership is responsible for budgets and for reviewing budgets, and leadership is not there to just dole out whatever dollars in expenditures are being asked for. And it's a complicated process. It's negotiation, it's prioritizing, and it's working back and forth between leadership and between staff. And I believe we need to do more work in that arena. We need to prioritize the spending, what we're doing, and we need to look at what should and what can be deferred or what can be eliminated. For example, we have, in the last 2 years, we've increased park maintenance over $200,000. I'd like to see what that involves. Are the things that could be deferred or eliminated? We have added headcount over the last couple of years, and in my view, what we've done is we've said, okay, we have a communications person, we have all these things that can be done by communication, but that doesn't, there are many things that can be done, there are not all things that have to be done. And so sometimes you just do less tasks in order to save headcount, and we all know that headcount is one of the most expensive parts of any budget. So we need to prioritize, we need to look at what can be reduced, and I would encourage the council to go after the reduction side, cost reduction side of the budget. And any questions you have, I'm willing to answer. Thank you.
All right, any further public? Thank you. Oh, okay, that's at the end. Are you here to speak on the budget, Mr. Quigg? So we are taking comments on the budget only right now. Mr. Quigg?
I can make anything talk about the budget there, Mayor. This is Jim Quigg. I live in Olympus. One rule, never follow Tam Kameen in public comment. I don't know if this is good for me, but I agree. I think, watching the spending is important. So this is my way of saying thank you so much to everybody that volunteered their time. This is just what I wanted to say. Newcastle Days was amazing. Great job to everybody that worked on that. The council, thank you for whatever money you're putting into the budget to make the Activities Commission work, because Nathan Sticks, Deb Paulson, everybody that volunteers for that crew did a great job, and our family enjoyed it. And I want to thank you guys for all the time you put into making sure the budget includes great activities for our community. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. All right, any further comments? Any virtual? Brad Corner. And Mr. Corner, please state your name and the neighborhood in which you reside, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Brad Corner. My residence is the Reserve. I've been a local resident for 16 years. Is this the testimony for the budget, or is that going to be later?
Yes, this is budget only.
This is budget only?
Yes.
Okay. I take issue when I read a budget that only goes the last 2 years, and all the comparisons are only last year to this year. Because of COVID, and because of actions this council's taken under COVID, specifically passing the utility tax, I believe a much better display for discussion purposes would have been the last 5 years to show the increases over time and being able to open it up for discussion with the public to say, what can we do to have a target that's more realistic for what's going on in the economy? A budget is a forward-looking exercise. If you look at what the news is today, it's not a very good forward-looking economic picture. I've never seen in 5 years a buildable lands report for the city of Newcastle. I would like to have seen one, because at least then you can forecast a little better development fees if you know the cost and makeup of what's available. And oftentimes, for these larger projects, there are no signs on the property. So either people on the council know the owners and know what their plans are, or they don't know when and if that money is ever going to come in. What it looks to me like is all the low-hanging fruit has been taken. And what's left is not going to render the same income. Therefore, the assumptions, and please don't break down the word assume, in 3 parts, as my English teacher said. The results are a disaster. But I think your assumptions are wrong. And I think based on the economic data, your assumptions are further wrong. And then to just disguise like it's no big deal, to increase the rate 1% a year, well, we'll do a catch-up. Let's do 2%. Have you really looked at what's going on with the real estate market in the last 6 months of the year versus the first 6 months? We know those valuations end as of January 31st. So next year, people are going to be paying higher taxes, along with higher inflated prices for everything else, and yet you're proposing a budget that's significantly above the real numbers from 2021 and 19. I therefore ask you to target much lower numbers in your budget work that's coming up, I believe, in a week. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments on the budget? Nothing in virtual? Oh, okay. That's okay, thank you. All right, any comments from the council? Okay. The public hearing is now closed. It is 7:35 PM. Any motions by the council? Okay, I will move on to the next topic. We have no unfinished business. That brings us to general business. Item number 11.1, possible reconstitution of the Economic and Community Development Committee. This item was asked to be added to the planning calendar by Deputy Mayor Sherlock and Councilmember Charbonneau. I will ask if either of you have anything to say about this item.
Thank you. I had a conversation with Community Development Director Hoffman about this. I'll defer to him first if he has any comments he'd like to share, or any items in regards to this you'd like to talk about.
Mark Hoffman, Community Development Director. Just to say before we start that we have staff capability and staff experience, but this is a council discussion and we await the outcome and direction.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock, anything to add?
Not right now. I think Councilmember Charbonneau might have some more to add.
Councilmember Charbonneau?
Thank you. Yes, so I'd like to, I guess I'll outline for folks how I got to this stage. I think I had, researched the structure of our council a bit when I was running for city council. I'd researched it since we've been here, and we've sort of operated under this modus operandi of, two committees that were being held, a salary and benefits committee, which meets in more of a infrequent ad hoc manner, as well as a finance committee, which meets more frequently, and both with different roles covering different aspects. And I had talked to former council members and other folks who had mentioned a community and economic development committee internally in our council, and just from talking to other folks in other neighboring cities and looking at structures of other cities, I see a lot of other cities had just frankly many more internal committees than we did. So I was curious about this, so I started talking to folks. I talked and met with the board of the Newcastle Chamber and talked with them about this. I talked with a couple local business folks about this, and I talked, essentially, I brought it up. I thought, okay, what is the process to go ahead and create something like this, right? I think this can have a lot of range to address, local business. How do we engage with them, create a business registry? I mean, I have a laundry list of ideas that we could engage with here. And to my surprise, when I actually engaged in this conversation and wanted to move forward on this, City Manager Pingle discovered that it is quite literally in our bylaws. It has just not been, regularly enforced. So I'm happy to engage in the discussion of what I think this could look like, all the good that I think could come from this, but sort of as I've been told here, and I took the time to meet with Community Development Director Hoffman about this to make sure, hey, do you have the staff time for this? He said yes. Hey, is this something you'd like to do? He said yes. And sort of the main point here is that coming away from this, as far as my understanding, there doesn't need to be a particular motion or anything like that. There just simply needs to have the mayor welcome applications, I believe, and appoint members to this internal committee. And I think there would be a period of, discussion with, former council members and other folks and the current council members on the committee of the purpose and the structure and what they want to take on. But that's the status of this and where it is at. So, I'd welcome more discussion on the item and would be happy to engage.
You're absolutely correct that we don't need a motion because it is on the books yet. And does anyone else have anything to add before I move? Okay. I would definitely support this, and I thank you for bringing it up. And what I would like to ask is if you are interested in serving on this committee, it would be a committee of 3 council members. Please email me by Friday, and then we will bring this back to the next council meeting. And with members' names and get it ratified. Yes.
Madam Mayor, clerk is curious, what is the scope going to be for this group that council members should be telling you they want to participate in?
So, I mean, years ago, I served on this committee, and it was, and maybe Director Hoffman should be answering this, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. From my past experience, there's flexibility. The issue that I see, and you have it in your materials, is that the scope is very general, very short, very broad. Economic and community development pretty much touches everything you discuss as a body. And the role is defined in your policies and procedures already, so there's no mystery there. It's not a second city council, it's a subcommittee of the city council. From my experience, the best use of such a committee is a sounding board or a listening group for the business community that can take on special items or issues in an identified scope and report back to the full council. The issue that I see with your, as currently written, is that it's not identified what those items would be, in addition to the items on your regular agenda. Feedback on the items on your regular agenda. And thus far, the feedback that I've gotten was that it's high-level identified issues agreed on in advance, then the subcommittee goes and dives into those issues, reports back, and it essentially ends. It wasn't used a lot. We have some evidence into 2018 going into a council retreat, and that's the last evidence we have of, in the records that I've seen, of this committee existing. And then COVID and pandemic hits. We also know that over the next 2 years, 3 years, we have some very high-level community and economic development efforts, issues coming. Comprehensive plan periodic update, primarily, an economic development element, input on land use, things like that. So we know there's a use, we can staff. There's a question of frequency, because other staff assets would be needed. But we have the capability, and I have 7, 8, 9 years experience directly with an economic development subcommittee of the council, as well as economic development in the format of a planning commission. So I'm not apprehensive as written in the policies and procedures, but staff would very much like some assistance with the scope or the issues based on discussion with the full council, so that this council subcommittee stays within a scope and does not start meeting frequently on every issue that we face. But we're open to it.
So, just briefly, one of the things that we want to ensure at least we understand and can advise council on as staff is with the two council committees we have now, for the finance committee, that committee is approached very differently, where we have to be compliant with OPMA, we have to take minutes, it has to be open to the public because they have financial authority. They can, up to a certain dollar amount, the finance committee can authorize funds. Salary and benefits is not the same way. They're advisory only, and would make recommendations to the full council. And so making that distinction is important as you narrow the scope, or as you identify a more specific scope. It changes the workload when it comes to staff support, whether there's going to be the level of authority that the committee would have. And so as we work through that, we just want to make sure we understand that so that we can provide proper advice to the council.
Thank you. Anything else?
Madam Mayor, I don't often interject, but I feel compelled at this juncture to point out that without having determined or proposed in writing what the scope of this iteration of this committee will be, you're asking council members to sign up, you're asking for staff to staff up an effort. And you've just heard from the public that they're fairly convinced that we're not using our time properly. So I would encourage a written scope for what this Economic Development Committee intends to accomplish before you appoint people to it. As your clerk, that is my strong recommendation, and that's what I had hoped we would all be discussing tonight.
Okay. So with that, I recommend we take the recommendations of our city clerk, Councilmember Villasenor, then Councilmember Clark.
Thank you. I think the city clerk took the words right out of my mouth. I think that on the surface, I think this is a great idea. I think our business community does need support. I think that we would do well to be able to collect some more direct feedback from our business community and see if we can't make better use of our resources in terms of helping them. This is, I think, but it's also, I would like to know more about how it is put together. Like, how are we going to go about the business of economic development? How are we going to interface with the business community? It would be helpful for me to see maybe what someone who's leading this might consider a sample agenda, just to understand more in depth as to what we are considering an economic development committee.
Councilmember Clark.
Well, kind of going to say the same thing, I think, but I would suggest or recommend that, without necessarily appointing people to this committee, I would just, Madam Mayor, solicit feedback from individuals that can be collected and perhaps sent to Councilmember Charbonneau, and he can, and Deputy Mayor Sherlock, and they can create or hone in a specific, not an agenda, a mission statement or something like that, right? So before, like the city clerk said, before appointing people, like, let's get an idea, like Councilmember Villasenor said, what is this going to be doing? So I would encourage Deputy Mayor Sherlock and Councilmember Charbonneau to kind of collect that. So whoever's interested on this council, I'll be interested, I'll send some feedback, and they collect it and perhaps bring some more detail to the next meeting. That might be an idea.
Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. I just want to, I'll clarify for folks. I think, yes, I'm glad folks are generally in agreement that it's a good idea. We just want more specificity. I didn't come with a higher level of specificity because it was, in our bylaws directly. So, but I hear you. I thought potentially we might, have the group meet and then they would sort of flesh it out a bit. But I'm happy to, I will send an email to the rest of the council soliciting. I will not do that because there's a violation. Thank you, Curtis. I will work with city staff to find a means to solicit feedback from council. On this topic, I will share, for the sake of transparency for the public and also with my other council members, some ideas I had in regards to this to maybe get your juices flowing or things like that. First and foremost, I would like to try to work on creating a registry of our businesses. We talked a lot about not having a way to contact our businesses, wanting to solicit feedback from them. I think that would be a great thing to do. I would like to, and I asked City Manager Pingle about this, I think it would serve more of that advisory role as opposed to doing those things so we could get more in-depth on topics to then bring back to a study session or bring back to council. There was also the opportunity to invite other members from the community, so I would played around with the idea of informally having a sort of standing invitation for a board member from the Chamber of Commerce to step in. We could see that from other sort of groups as well if there was one that we determined was appropriate. I think it's a topic folks care about in terms of the community development part that we're not really discussing as much of the growth and addressing that. There's also other ideas like there's a King County, it's called K4C working group that looks at climate planning for the future that I would have a conversation with. I've had conversations with our community development director about that. Preparing to join a group like that would take some work and would be reviewed potentially by this committee, and it's a very, not a financial commitment or other items from us really, but we need to, do the work to join it. And then getting more in depth on a lot of these issues we talk about, whether it's tenant protections, whether it's homelessness, all these other items, it could be sort of shepherded through that committee as you have a deeper conversation and more engagement from not just the outside community, but sort of the entities that do a lot of this work and bring them in. That is what I'm thinking. Thank you.
So just to clarify the city attorney's concern, if we just want to avoid virtual meetings and so that we're avoiding having an illegal meeting. So if we can either work through myself or Director Hoffman, that would be preferable.
Yeah. And what I am thinking, and again, open for recommendations and redirecting, but if we can get ideas and feedback to City Manager Pingle and Director Hoffman, we can bring it back to a study session because, as you know, we've implemented monthly study sessions. So maybe that this would be a nice topic to have at our study session rather than bring it back to council and have a really good discussion over it. Councilmember Griffin.
Thank you, Mayor Dewing. 2 years ago, we hired a consulting firm. We didn't have a economic committee, but we hired a consulting firm out of Texas to do essentially the same thing that we're talking about now. And then last year, we, through the Port of Seattle, hired another consulting firm to look at our city and see what they could do. I never did see any results of both of those consulting firms, so.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, in the past, was this a committee that had authority to? No, okay, because it sounds like it doesn't need to be, in my opinion. And my other question was, is it only, are these types of committees only council members and staff, or would other community members potentially be able to be appointed to the committee, or how does that work?
Well, so this committee, like finance and salary and benefits, is included in council policies and procedures, and so it's kind of dictated as to what members can be a part of it and who appoints them. I think Councilmember Charbonneau kind of spoke to you. Certainly, the committee could have kind of a standing invite to other boards or other people to attend and be included in their conversations.
Okay, we have a plan. All right, thank you, everyone. Moving on. Item 11.2, homelessness and public safety. This was added to the planning calendar by Council members Robert Clark and Council member Bocotia. So with that, I will turn it over to them. Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. Thank you, Director Bronze. On your screens, you will see a PowerPoint. I sent this to each council member earlier, or the city clerk did earlier today, but for the public following along at home, there's a PowerPoint. And if anybody would like a copy of this after the meeting, please contact me or the city clerk, and we'll be glad to get it to you.
Just for general information, we will attach this as an addendum to today's agenda.
Okay. Thank you, City Clerk. Next slide, please. So a little background on this. And again, these are bullet points, so I'll be glad at the end to answer any questions if you have any. So across our region, a number of cities and municipalities have expanded public protections in response to the growing homeless issue. The most recent case you're probably all familiar with is the big fight in Chinatown International District against expanding that YMCA building. So it's in the news. It's an issue. It's in the region. It's something that is on everybody's mind. It's visible. not necessarily in Newcastle at this point. So what we're looking to do, or what cities and municipalities around the area have done, is they've expanded through code changes and other things to prohibit additional areas from camping. In other words, enhancing the definition of public spaces so that they can, eliminate or prevent camping in more areas in their city. There's been a lot of recent court rulings about this. The most famous one is Martin versus Boise, where homelessness, and let me be clear, homelessness is not a crime. It's not our intention tonight to make it a crime. But they addressed what this camping issue could do. As long as there's available shelters nearby, essentially, then if it's necessary and there's no other reason or other ability, the law enforcement in the community can prevent people from camping if there's homeless shelters available. A lot of the local municipalities have incorporated these provisions. Most recently, Everett, Tacoma, Edmonds, and Mercer Island are examples. For tonight, I'm going to focus primarily on Mercer Island because they're our closest neighbor. Next slide. So what I'm going to try to do tonight, and got a few purposes, I want to talk about enhancing public safety through modification of the Newcastle Municipal Code. This will increase, in my opinion, the tools in the toolbox for our police officers should they need them. It places our code in line with recent court rulings, like I mentioned. And we're not reinventing the wheel. We're copying. What I'd like to do is suggest is we copy a program successfully implemented by Mercer Island and other Washington neighbor cities like Edmonds, for example, did the same thing. Next slide. All right. We are not, like I said, going to be discussing the legality of homelessness, right? It's not illegal to be homeless. It's not a crime. I'm not proposing or discussing anything about that. I'm not going to say that we should make it a crime. That's not part of the agenda tonight. We're also not going to be talking about causes of homelessness or solutions to homelessness. That's way beyond our scope here in this meeting. There's been hundreds of millions of dollars spent regionally, and the issue is getting worse. So we're not going to solve it in our little council meeting tonight. Next slide, please. Okay, there's a question mark here. I put it on purpose. Where homeless populations increase, crime victimization increases. So like any issue, right? There's two or more sides to every issue. You can ask a bunch of people, and they'll say that whenever homeless show up, the crime goes up, and everybody's a victim in the community. And you'll find other people who will say, the homeless themselves are the victims, and they should be taken care of and nurtured, right? And you're going to find people on both sides of this issue. But what is not in dispute is when homelessness increases, one or the other groups will suffer some increase in crime. So it's not a stretch to say crime increases, whether it's for the homeless people or the people in the community. Next slide. Our most recent survey from 2021, and we did it in a citywide survey, there was two interesting results in this survey. The first result, and there's a lot of results in the survey, but two things stand out. The highest public safety priority, number one, is efforts by police to proactively prevent crime. That was a pretty high number in percentage from our citizens. Okay, so they've made it clear what's important. The highest level of service the city should focus on in the next 2 years was local police protection. Now, this was of all issues, transportation, business, you name it, right? The number one above all things on the survey, people said the city should focus on local police protection. And I don't have it in my presentation, but just today, somebody sent me a survey that was taken by Como 4 News, so it's not on your presentation, but some interesting results here. And there's a lot of different topics covered in this survey. Question, tell me the two of the following that you think should be the top priorities for Washington's elected leaders to focus on. The top two, crime and public safety and homelessness. And they were pretty far ahead of the next one, which was surprisingly cost of living was not as important to people as crime and public safety and homelessness. So that's a statewide survey, but it's relevant. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're not starting from scratch. I said we're not reinventing the wheel, right? Mercer Island in 2021, which was last year, and you may remember they took a lot of heat over this, but they changed the section of their city code. And what they did is they enhanced the definition of public property. And so basically they expanded what is public property. And by doing that, they said no camping on public property. So more areas then are protected for what they're intended for the public use and not for other uses like camping. I spoke to several Mercer Island council members and their chief of police when I was preparing for this meeting. And the two council members who brought this forward in Mercer Island, they both have lawyers by training, but they legally and extensively vetted this before they brought it for the public. Right, so they just didn't throw it out there and hope that it stuck. They really did their homework. They made sure that this ruling in Mercer Island had a lot of legal teeth to it. And they asked also when they passed this, they said to the police chief, come back in 6 months and give us a report. So they're happy to report that they've had really very few issues and they don't arrest people. This is not, they're not, by passing these laws, they're not looking to arrest their way out of an issue, right? They're just protecting the public by expanding the definition of public property. So word has spread. The police chief was pretty, pleased. I know we'll probably hear from our police chief tonight about this, but he was, they hadn't seen any increase in homeless. In other words, the problem has not proliferated over the last year. Whether it's because of this or not, they simply, word gets out in the homeless community that Mercer Island, hey, they don't want you camping here in all these areas. And most homeless people, they'll move on, right? They're not looking for issues. Next slide, please. So what did they do specifically? And you can look this up for people who are looking at this presentation, but they've created an ordinance, 21C02, basically what it says, and you'll have to go look at it to get all the detail, but basically it expanded the definition of public property, and it also included the wording, very specific wording, that this law cannot be enforced if there are no shelters available in the area. Well, fortunately for King County in our area, there's a number of shelters available. Specifically, they use 2 shelters, but there are, the King County Regional Homelessness Authority is expanding, and there's other options available as well. The last line there is highlighted because if you're clicking on this at home or you have it goes directly to the code section of Mercer Island. There's too much wording to put in this presentation, but next slide, please. Newcastle, we currently do not have a definition of public property. There's nothing in our code about public property. We do have 2 sections in our code. Section 010 defines camping, right? So that is in there. Most cities will have something like that. And Section 160 prohibits camping, but its scope is limited to trails and parks and city property. Okay, so what our code does not include is prohibition about camping at schools, open spaces, streets, easements, sidewalks, public squares, and other places. So these are not specifically covered, and they're not. It doesn't say you can't camp in these areas. So yes, somebody could throw up a tent at the school. They could throw up a tent next to the bus stop. Sure, we have other laws about loitering, right? But if somebody's camping in the back of the school property, it's a little bit more beneficial to have an ordinance against camping. So I suggest, and we're not going to make a decision tonight. Let me be very clear on that, right? There was some concerns. But I would suggest adding an entire new section of the code. I just picked a number that's at the end of that section 12. And basically, of course, it has to be vetted by our city attorney, but that we would basically copy what Mercer Island has done, which, like I said, has been vetted extensively over the before they implemented it, and it's not been court challenged over the last year and a half. Next slide, please. So this is from the Mercer Island Code, and this is what what I propose our code would say. It is the purpose of this chapter to promote public safety, health, general welfare, and economic health and well-being, and so on. I'm not going to read it. To prevent the uses of public property which interfere with the rights of others to use public property for which it is intended, and to prevent harm to the safety, health, and welfare of the public. So really, this is this is not an anti-homeless law. This is a way to protect or enhance our public protections. Next slide, please. So, and they're also very clear on Mercer Island. This is not an attempt to discriminate, all right? And this is what basically this section is saying. We're not expressly or implicitly or otherwise, denigrating or promoting one group of citizens over another, right? That's not the purpose. Next slide, please. So this is from the Mercer Island Code. I kind of alluded to it. Public property, which they did not have that definition either before, means all property in the city in which the city or any governmental entity has a property interest, including easements, right? And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it expanded every space that could be considered a public property or a public used area, right? To expand their jurisdiction over no camping. Next slide, please. So the X's represent where our, whatever new code we decide, whatever section, these are suggestions, right? So I changed the words Mercer Island to Newcastle in this, but this is a direct copy of the Mercer Island. So preventing camping within public property. The next section there talks about prevents, it's unlawful to store personal property, camp facilities, camp paraphernalia, and so on public property. We do have a section, to be clear, in our code already that deals with vehicles and parking of vehicles and so on, and that's not included in this. This is simply camping. Next slide, please. And this is where Mercer Island did extensive vetting and where, this has been kind of tested, so to speak. The city shall not enforce the provisions of the previous two pages that I mentioned against persons experiencing homelessness unless the city first confirms there is an available overnight shelter that can be utilized. So, the way I look at this is that we're not only protecting the public from, not improper uses of property, but this is, we're actually making it a code that we want to get people to a shelter because homeless people deserve to get to shelters, right? A lot of people don't want to go to the shelters, but if there's an option, we don't want people to say, well, I just don't want to go, and then become a public issue for us in Newcastle. If there's an option, they have to be given that option, and that leads to us being able to protect our public property. Next slide, please. Okay, so what Mercer Island did, in which I don't necessarily think we need to do, but Mercer Island, they went a step further and they developed an actual contract with these two homeless shelters, the Congregation for the Homeless, which is a men's shelter, and Sophia Way, which is a women's shelter, and they developed an outreach program simultaneously with the ordinance, so that if they encounter, the police officers encounter a homeless person and the person doesn't necessarily want help right away, they can call because people don't necessarily, if they're homeless, want to directly talk to the police. So they have people that can come out from these two places. I was corresponding with our Chief Hauk, and he's aware of these shelters. He's aware of other options that people have, or outreach programs, and we don't necessarily need to, at this point, provide or pay for any services to contract for outreach programs. But there are homeless shelters very nearby. Okay, and that's the point. Next slide, please. Okay, to reiterate, excuse me, all right, I'm not attempting, have no interest in outlawing, banishing, or criminalizing homelessness, right? Very clear on that, right? It's not illegal to be homeless. I'm not going to change that. We're not advocating the arrest of anyone or increasing punishment. Our code already refers to misdemeanors, and the police have discretion in those matters, right? So, if the police encounter somebody camping, they're not going to just throw them in the squad car and take them to jail, right? They're going to talk to them and try to get them help, and that's what we want, right? We want them to be able to have resources, and to be clear, the police are going to talk to them anyway, right? Not whether we have this code or not, but It just protects and enhances the public interest in public property. Okay, so this is an expansion of public safety by extending protections over more areas of our city. There is no cost to the city to implement this, right? We're changing the code, there's some staff time, I get it. We're gonna have our city attorney have to look at any changes we propose, but it's not gonna be a financial investment to the city. Okay, so, yes. Next slide, please. So what I propose, and again, I'm not expecting a vote tonight, but this is what I would like, because the city attorney certainly is gonna have to review any changes, is that I would suggest, and I would like to see, the Newcastle Municipal Code be updated to mirror what Mercer Island has done, with an ordinance perhaps. And of course, we'll outreach to the public to make sure that they understand what we're doing. Are there any questions for me, or, I know Chief Haupt was interested in making a few comments. I don't know if he still is or not, but,
Yeah, so what we'll do is take questions and then I will ask the chief.
Sure.
Okay. Councilmember Lakota.
Firstly, thank you, Councilmember Clark, for this very thorough research. That was an amazing presentation. You did most of the heavy lifting, and I think this was pretty clear on what needs to be done, and it should be easy for the staff to follow once, of course, our city attorney approves it. Just want to add, before coming here, I was watching the news, the 4 p.m. news, and as we are speaking, City of Kent, I think it was, City of Kent at this moment is also passing an ordinance where they are including that, there is no camping in the public spaces. So in addition to Everett, Tacoma, Edmonds, Mercer Island, Kent, and we already know what's going on in Seattle, they're already clearing some space. So again, this is all about public safety. When we were out, visiting the citizens, this was their concern. Every time we asked them what you would like to see us do, and they were like, public safety should be our first priority. Our surveys have shown that. And all we are doing with this is simply, in terms of public safety, we are crossing our T's and dotting our I's. That's what we are doing for the city of Newcastle. It's very straightforward and simple, and I think this is what we've been hearing from the citizens, and this is what should be our next step that we should take. Thank you.
Anyone else with questions? Councilmember Charbonneau, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Clark, for putting in the time and effort with this. I do think I apologize it had to sit for so long before we could address it. I would love to see things like this in the future. These are great examples of things that would fit into a study session, and our process for getting things, as we've talked before, moving forward to a meeting, I think definitely needs to be reviewed. That being said, homelessness is a global problem that is very complex. I think it's important to state that nothing is, as you said, being solved here. I had a few questions that I wanted some clarification on. I'll start by saying I think if we were to bring this back and consider this at a future meeting, I would really strongly feel that I'd want different organizations that do this sort of work here, right? So you mentioned the 2 shelters that were in your presentation. I think the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, absolutely. Hearing from public safety entities, absolutely. And additionally, I know there's an organization called Street Level through the Salvation Army that helps folks specifically that are in a car and unhoused. I think I do have a question about type of shelters, right? So I think there are certain situations. You described a men's shelter. I know Bellevue's worked on a men's shelter. What if the individual has a young child? What if they are with a family, right? Are we just saying, hey, they have, hey, there is a shelter available, so good luck, go figure it out. you know, what are the situations, right? If it's a woman who's uncomfortable being in a shelter with other men, that's a valid concern, and I don't want to shoehorn that in as a solution. What if someone's in their car as well, right? We talk about the idea of camping. Can camping encompass the idea of, you know, being in your car? Because a lot of times people are in a personal vehicle. I think, you know, I want to, moving forward as we have more conversation on this, I want to really clearly say two things. One, I think a lot of times these conversations delve into the idea of people being angry about visible homelessness as opposed to addressing sort of the root causes that cause people to be homeless in the first place. I know you're not talking, you clarified in your presentation, you're not talking about the root causes, but I want to make sure it's not a discussion just on visible homelessness of this idea of, well, we don't want to see people that are homeless. These are humans. I think they need to be treated with dignity and respect. And then I think the rhetoric too, just I feel very strongly as a mental health advocate of, you know, tethering folks that are homeless directly to substance abuse without question, or directly to, you know, mental illness without question, and that's not appropriate, I don't think. I think it can certainly be a co-occurrence, but I don't think it's appropriate to do. And I just want to, I would ask the community and the council to be aware of those things and be cognizant as we continue the discussion here.
Councilmember Clark, go ahead.
Thank you. Good questions, Councilmember Charbonneau. I'll just, in random order, I'll just address these. So I did mention this does not cover vehicles, right? This is strictly camping, throwing up a tent or sleeping on the ground, that kind of stuff. There are, yes, I mentioned a men's and women's shelter. Of course, there's family situations that would not be covered by either one. We're not going to force the family, you know, into an inappropriate situation. I get that. That's a police discretion level thing, obviously. You know, and the root causes of homelessness, you know, again, you get 5 people, you get 5 opinions. So yeah, we're not, and I'm not attempting or interested in, well, I'm interested, of course. I'm not, this is not an attempt to address that, right? You know, that's not what I'm trying to do here. Certainly, I think perhaps a study session, I would be, at the end of the question period, I would like to, actually the city manager, the city attorney suggest the next step for us, because I know this, I've had email conversations with the city attorney about this. So how would we proceed? But if other questions first.
All right, Councilmember Griffin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. My question is not to Councilmember Clark, but it's to everybody else. Why would we be reluctant to not to put this ordinance in operation? You know, I can't think of a reason why we wouldn't be interested in making sure that we have the best safety protection for the city. So I think that it's something everybody needs to think about, rather than, it's not Clark's answer to this, but I would say we should go ahead with it.
Great. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember Clark, for pulling this together. I think this is an important discussion. I think our community, being bordered by larger communities, I mean, it's important to have something that fits in regionally. And I know that I know that sometimes we want to not go with the flow in terms of what the region is doing, and sometimes we do want to go with the flow of what the region is doing. And I think there is a larger discussion. So thanks for getting this ball rolling. I really appreciate that. You know, it isn't so straightforward and simple as some of the other council members might make it. I think this is this is something that takes some discussion. I think the community needs to be involved. I think that you know, as we start to hammer this out, having you know, maybe a public hearing of some kind, you know, getting some additional feedback from the public is an important part of this process. And but thank you for putting the detail to it and outlining how Mercer Island is dealing with it. I think it's definitely something to consider. So thank you very much.
All right, Chief Hauk, do you have anything to add?
Sorry, I'm going to be a little out of order here because I'm on vacation for 2 weeks, and I was on vacation this morning, but I decided to leave that to come talk about this because I feel so strongly about it. I don't know where to begin. I don't agree with this ordinance that you want to put forward. I've always been taught just because somebody does something doesn't mean I should do it too. Just because other cities do it doesn't mean we should. Your whole, the PowerPoint, it's nothing but homeless this, homeless that, homeless this, homeless that. But you say it's not about homeless people. You didn't mention anybody else in that. It was all about homeless people. 22 years ago when I started this job, I thought that homeless people were homeless because they were lazy and didn't want to do anything, and all they needed to do was just go get a job. There's jobs everywhere and all that kind of stuff. And after 22 years, I've gotten to know those people. I know that they're hardworking individuals. A lot of them, some of them suffer from mental health issues. Some of them suffer from substance abuse issues. And again, I know you're not trying to, you can say, I'm not trying to criminalize homelessness, but that's like starting out a conversation by saying, with all due respect, and that doesn't mean you get to say whatever you want afterwards. Everything you said was pointed at homelessness. And putting laws in place or ordinances that myself and the deputies that work for me are going to be required to enforce aren't going to help these people. A long time, I've been in the city for 4 years, 4.5 years. I can count on one hand the number of times I've been called about a homeless person. His name is Robert Dedeau. We've had 2 camps. One of them is Roberts, and then there was one in the very, very far southwest corner of the city, almost in Renton, down in May Creek Park or whatever. And with the ordinances that we already have, we went down there, offered them a shelter, and they took it, and they left. Robert has family that lives in Newcastle, will not take any help from us. He's a chronic alcoholic, and before this last week, when I mysteriously got 2 phone calls about Robert, or 2 complaints about Robert, the last time we got a phone call about this person that's so dangerous that we want to create ordinances was when he put his recycling and trash that he bagged up from the camp he's staying in somebody else's trash can, and they called the police because they didn't want to. They thought they were going to have to pay extra for the pickup of the recycling and the trash. So your Como news poll or whatever it is, where it said, I think you said the most important things were crime and public safety and homelessness. Well, what is the context of that? Is it crime and public safety, like all the shootings and violent crime that's going on? And then homelessness, how can we fix it? Or I would like to know the context behind that, because I don't think there's any context. And my bet would be that the crime and safety is all the people that are getting shot and robbed, and cars getting stolen and that sort of stuff. And the homelessness is fixing homelessness, not intertwined. So without context, I don't know that poll does me any good to sway my opinion. You've stated before, when we're talking about budgets, you want to look to Councilman Lacotia and Councilman Griffin because they have some CPA and accounting stuff. You did talk to me about it, but completely ignored anything I've said in my opposition to what you've said. So I don't understand why you've talked about how you're not an expert in everything, and I'm not an expert. But you look towards the people that are in that profession, like Councilmember Griffin and Councilmember Lacotia, when it comes to budget issues. But when it comes to something that me and my people are going to be tasked with, and I give you my opinions, they're completely discounted. So I'm not in favor of these at all. We already have ordinances. We can talk to anybody we want to at any time. We don't have to see them committing a crime. We can go over and talk to them. And we've done it in the past. We don't need ordinances that are going to give us more opportunity to go talk to homeless people. There's, like I said, one homeless person in the city that we know of. And he has refused services, and he's going to, because they can't keep all of their stuff there. They don't want to get up and move every single day. They don't want to get up at 5 a.m., et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'd be all for signing up like Mercer Island has done and having an outreach person with Sophia's Way or the CFH or any other organization. But based on recent comments and inquiries from council members about what's the bare minimum the city can afford, I've never brought that up. So, because it would be a cost issue. Whereas right now, it's free. We call and say, hey, if you've got bed space, we've had somebody available. That's never happened here because nobody's ever taken it. So the city of residents in the city of Newcastle don't have any problem calling us, talking to us, and saying, hey, nobody stops at this stop sign. Nobody goes the speed limit past this area. These people are always having parties and it's too loud. I've never, not one time in all the national night outs, all the community events that I go to, not once has anybody said, what are you gonna do about all the homeless people roaming around Newcastle? Not one time. So I feel like you're spinning your wheels trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. That's my opinion. And I don't want to put my officers in the position that they would be in of having to arrest somebody because they don't want to leave the one home that they know. And Robert has lived here in this city his entire life. He went to Risdon. So it's not like he's just some guy that just showed up, 2 years ago and lives in a park and harasses people. I don't understand the need to make more ordinances when what we have is already enough. And I don't know what problem is trying to be solved.
Thank you, Chief. I can't top that. Thank you very much. Councilmember Griffin?
Thank you. In what way would this increase your work and your efforts? In what way would it limit you?
In what way would it? It wouldn't really increase our work or efforts because, like I said, we don't have an issue. We don't have an issue that needs to be addressed. That's part of the problem. I can't understand why
we don't have an ordinance on the books that talks about it, and Mercer Island did, and other cities do, and if it doesn't make any difference in your work or your efforts, why would you oppose it?
Because if it was enacted and then something did become a problem, then we're not given an opportunity to do what we have always done. Like we were forced into doing something by ordinances like that.
No, I don't think the ordinance forced you into doing anything. You go out and you talk to the people the same as you would do now. And I don't understand why you'd be opposed to it.
Because it doesn't help the people that need the help. If you want to come up with an ordinance that helps these people, like he said, that this is for the safety of the residents that live here and to help these people, but then in the next slide said, I don't want to get in a agreement with Sophia's Way or the Coalition for the Homeless. Well, who are we protecting? Who are we?
Okay, suppose I go on vacation and I come home and somebody's got a tent sitting up in my backyard. I call you and what do you do?
This ordinance wouldn't do anything for that because it's not public property. That's private property, and you can easily tell us to move them along.
Okay. So that's nothing that would be a real problem, is it?
No,
No.
it's private
But if-
property.
If we make the sidewalks public, then they can't pitch tents on there, can they?
No.
Okay, yeah, that was.
How many
part of
tents,
the deal.
like, do you see tents in the city that are just pitched on the
We
sidewalk?
haven't yet, but we don't know what we're going to be looking at in the future, because when the train comes out here, we get more people coming to the area, and they keep chasing them out of Seattle. We're probably going to be having more people here than we're used to.
The train's not coming to Newcastle. We don't have any of the services that the cities that are experiencing these places have. We don't have a food pantry. We don't have methadone clinics. We don't have a hospital, really. We have the clinic. We don't have food banks. We don't have shelters. We don't have all of the resources, and for lack of a better word, the magnets that draw folks that are homeless to those areas. So I just, I don't understand why it is this is necessary. I just truly don't. I think that by doing this as a city and as the chief police officer in that city, I don't like to be the face of despite what he says, I don't like to be the face of criminalizing someone being homeless. And that's what these ordinances would do.
The ordinance doesn't criminalize anybody.
It does.
No.
It didn't, not one time was anybody but homeless people mentioned in that. So if you create an ordinance that says, talk about speed limits, or the speed limit on this road is 20 miles an hour and then 30 miles an hour and blah, 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 and then say we're not going to look for speeders, it's not about speeders, it's about public safety. The ordinance is about speeders.
Yeah.
Okay? It's just like if you say we don't want, you can't have tents here on the sidewalk, you can't have tents in the trails, you can't have tents in the park. This is not about homeless people, this is about campers. It's about homeless people, and I'm not going to be the one who victimizes these people more.
We weren't asking that.
That's what this ordinance asks us to do.
No.
Yes, it does. Just like I wouldn't tell you what something in a CPA or some sort of financial document I would expect, and that you wouldn't tell me what a legal ordinance requires and forces us to do.
I still don't understand your problem with it. There's one.
Chief. Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. I know we've had some correspondence. So our current code says you can't camp on a trail, right? That's what it says, right? You can't camp on a trail, right? It already says that, and it's a misdemeanor, right? So there's no difference, and there's no change to, or denigrating anybody if suddenly you can not camp by the bus shelter or on the school grounds, right? We're not targeting homeless people. We're saying that you can't already camp here, you also can't camp here. That doesn't say, hey, you homeless person, you can't, it just says you can't camp. Now you can't camp here either, right? We're not denigrating homelessness, and we're not making homelessness illegal, right? You already would interact with somebody camping on the trail or in the park, and now you would also do the same interaction with somebody in the schoolyard or on the ball field, right? So I don't think I appreciate your feedback, but I don't think you heard anything I said during the presentation, because you are saying that I'm trying to criminalize homelessness. That's not true. This is a proactive measure, right, to prevent a future possible problem. And maybe you're right, and we'll never have a problem. That would be awesome, right? That would be great. You wouldn't have to deal with it. We have to talk to anybody. We wouldn't have to discuss it up here. We'll never have the problem, right? That's what you're saying, is that it hasn't rained in 7 years, so why should I build a roof on my house? Or nobody's ever shot at me, so why should I wear a bulletproof vest? we're making this proactive, so we're putting a tool in the toolbox. All we're doing is we're taking existing ordinances about camping in this area, in this area, in this area, and we're adding a couple areas to it. We're not criminalizing anything or making punishment worse or making your job more difficult. This is a proactive measure, and frankly, I'm very surprised that as a law enforcement officer, you would say, I don't want more tools in my toolbox, right? I get your position. You understand they're people that you've come to sympathize with. That's fantastic. That means you're empathetic when you interact with them. That's a great reflection on Newcastle. But I and my council member fellows here work for the people who have said, do something about this. So I appreciate your opinion, but I work for them and not you. And now you're a valuable city employee with great experience, but I have to work for the people who've asked me to do something about it. And they want a tool in the toolbox, a proactive tool, like I'm putting a roof on my house or something to prevent something that happens in the future. So I'm not, let me be very clear, and I said it during the presentation, I am not going to make your work harder. I'm not trying to make life difficult for you, which I feel that you feel is an issue. I am trying to help the public by putting a tool and expanding what can't be camped on. That's it. That's it. It's so simple, right? You can't camp in that chair, well, you also can't camp in that chair. It's the same thing, right? I just don't understand, where you're coming from. So, I'm sure we're going to discuss this more, but I don't think I could have been more clear and simple in my presentation.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone for all the input and thought that's gone into this. My question, Chief, and I think we will have more discussions on this. And if you can't or don't want to answer this right now, you want to think about it, that's fine. But what I kind of heard from you, so correct me if I'm wrong, is that you may be more open to something like this if it also involves the use of, being together with multiple shelters and different options to give you those resources. Because it sounds like what Councilmember Clark is suggesting, what I'm hearing from you is that it's not giving you more resources. It's giving you more work or just frankly making you the bad guy in a lot of cases. And I'm just curious if does something like this make more sense to you if we do explore options that from like shelters and other places like that?
Yes, like I said, I'm all for doing what Mercer Island has done with joining the Coalition for Housing, Sophia's Way, and all that kind of stuff. Councilman Clark explicitly said we don't need to do that. You list all these things that we're going to prevent and that will go against the people that decide to camp, because it's not just homeless people apparently. But then when it comes time to do anything to help them, you decided that wasn't, the city doesn't have enough money or something to do that. So I don't understand. Yeah, if that's part of this and we're willing to get on board with Sophia's Way and the Coalition for the Homelessness, or for the homeless, go for it.
But you still can't force them to go to a shelter.
No, you can't.
Absolutely not.
Again, this whole thing, it's.
Chief, I couldn't agree more. I really could not. And you said it very well, and I appreciate that. And there's a lot of, I feel like the court is very fickle in this area. We don't know which way they're going to go. I'm not willing to hang out the city for litigation. I'm not willing to do that.
And none of the officers that work here are going to do that either.
And we don't even have enough police officers to cover all shifts all the time. We are running very thin in your department.
Yeah. Again, but that's not I'm not worried about the extra workload this is going to create, because it's not going to. This isn't a problem.
I know. Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. What I'm sensing is I think there are a few things here. What I'm about to do is I'm actually going to make a motion to table this item for either a future study session or a future meeting. I think, want to pick up, there's a lot, I think, thank you, Chief, for taking time out of your vacation to come here and testify and share your experience on the, dealing with this hands-on, dealing with this. I think we absolutely should listen to that and respect that. I think I would elevate Councilmember Villaseñor's comment too of this is not, a very simple issue. I think there's a lot, and looking at the larger area, I do think, I think in the presentation we had, I think there's intrinsically this is going to be, it's easy to say that we, we're not talking about the root causes of homelessness. We're not talking about legality and all this, but intrinsically you're doing that with a motion like this. So I think, that being said, I do think this conversation is really productive. I think having these and further fleshing these issues out educates all of us. It educates the public. All of us are folks that, work and come out to council meetings and try to engage on all these issues. So it would be interesting in further discussing it. I think just quite frankly, tensions are pretty high right now too. And I don't think it's best practice to make a decision all the time when tensions are high. I want to be respectful of folks that put in the work that came here. So I would move to table this item to I don't know whether it's appropriate to say a future meeting or study session, but.
So I guess what we need we need to know what kind of information you want staff to bring back for.
I'm willing to enter, if other folks have action items as well, I'm willing to.
Or are you just looking for a council discussion at a study session?
I'm open to ideas. I think, out of respect for work that was on this, I don't want to just, I would want to give folks the avenue to continue discussing this, but I think making a decision right now would be to yes or no on this one or the other would not be appropriate.
So, Madam Mayor, just a point of clarification.
Yes.
There is no question on the table at this time. This is not an action item. If it's the council member's desire to limit further discussion at this time, then that's one course of action. But there's no question under consideration to be laid on the table.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, I'm going to ask City Clerk White to correct me. As far as how we move forward, if we're going to move this forward to a study session or an additional discussion, I would just want to make sure we understand expectations of staff as far as research or providing information or contacting entities to join us. If there was going to be a desire to bring an ordinance or something like that back, I would prefer to have a majority of the council indicate that. But it sounds like that's not what we're going after at this point. And so I just would make that clarification. If that's not what we're asking for at this point, I don't think there's any action for the council to take. But I would like to understand what the expectations of staff are as far as a future study session.
Thank you. I think that's exactly what I was looking for. Councilmember Clark.
Well, it was my hope that we could at least have the city attorney look at the legality of the Mercer Island Code if and when we decided to table it and talk about it. So I did have, full disclosure, I did have email discussions with him about this. So, that's, does that fit in his opinion, right? That's what a question we would need to know at some point. So there's, look at that at any time.
Yeah, so I'm more than happy to have an executive session whenever council wants to have an executive session on ordinances or code sections around homelessness, and specifically around, an analysis of Mercer Islands. But, I would leave it to you to tell me when you want to do that. In my mind, that seems to be a step that would be taken at the point where council has decided that they are looking to possibly move forward. But if you want that information before, and in the discussion, so you kind of get the lay of the land, I'm more than happy to have that earlier. I just need you guys to know, or need to know from all of you when you want that opinion, and I can do the groundwork and we can do the executive session.
So how much time would you need?
I don't think I would need a terrible amount of time.
Okay.
If you wanted to do it at the next meeting, I think I could be prepared for the next or the next meeting for an executive session on the topic.
Councilmember Griffin.
Could we do that and then maybe put it back on the agenda by, sometime in the future?
Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely do that, or you could flip it. You could talk about it again, and then have an executive session after you talk about it again. I mean, it's just procedurally, however y'all want to move forward.
Council, are you okay with an executive session? Go ahead, City Manager Pingle. Oh, okay, I thought you were. Are you okay with an executive session on November 1? Yeah, we do.
Yes, in fact, and there are photographs that we're hoping to take that evening.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, let's kind of target a month. So either the 15th of November or the first meeting of December. All right, moving on. Additional public comment, and I do believe, Chief Hauk, thank you. I do believe I have one other additional one signed up. Chuck Scheinbaum, are you in the audience still? He did, okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Any virtual? Okay, I will go ahead and close the public comment planning calendar. And couple little things before I turn it over to City Manager Pingle. If you have anything you would like to add to the planning calendar, we'd like to recommend that you do add it to the planning calendar, and we can bring that to a study session because we have implemented that program. Another thing is November 1, we have photos, council photos at 6 p.m. As you know, we were unable to do them last year because of the pandemic. And with that, I'll turn it over to City Manager Pingle.
Thank you, Mayor. Not much else to point out. We added a couple of things. Hope to bring the legislative agenda to put in front of the council at the November 15th meeting. I do anticipate putting a draft in front of the council as soon as possible. If possible, I'll include it in Friday's update to the council. If not, for sure, next Friday. It just kind of is a matter of how quickly we can turn it around after I meet with our lobbyist. And so we'll get that in front of you as soon as possible, but certainly well ahead of November 15th. And then we also put on for the December 6th meeting, something that needs to come back to council's attention is our public defense contract. They indicated a few months ago that there would be an increase that's bigger than usual. We finally got that proposal from them, and so we're kind of working through whether just to put that in front of the council or if we need to shop a little bit, and so working through that process.
All right, any questions? Okay, Councilmember Clark.
I do have, and I'm not sure how to frame this, so despite my love fest with Chief Hauk here, right, I do feel that we need to provide the police with the additional shields that he requested at the last budget retreat. So there was shields, some vests, and entry kits, I believe. Let city manager help me out. How do we get that? so that we could fast track that item, so we could discuss that and get that equipment to our police.
I guess we can do a couple of ways. We can certainly include it in the budget. We did determine that we could spend, that would be capital, that we could include it in capital. Maybe we didn't.
It is not now in the budget, we would have to
Right.
include it.
We'd have to include it. But, so we could do that, and then we could order it as early in 2023 as possible, unless we need it in the next 2 months. And so-
Or a budget amendment this year and do it this year.
Right.
But I don't know how fast he could get the equipment here.
Right, that would,
We could
It has to
discuss
be
it on
delivered.
Saturday.
yeah, and so that would be the two things. If we need to include it, we do want to include a budget amendment with primarily implementing the pandemic relief plan. I think on the November 1st, it's on the November 1st meeting. And certainly if we wanted to include it in a budget amendment for this year, we'd want to get it in that, so we don't have to do another one.
Well, it has to be delivered by December 31st. It can't be, it's not a matter of just putting it in the budget.
Right.
We have to receive it.
We'd have to expend the funds, right? But we certainly can put it in for the end of the 2023 budget.
Okay, Councilmember Charbonneau?
Thank you. For the legislative agenda, I was kind of curious, I've candidly felt kind of disengaged from the process. I guess I would like to know what the, formal channel is for us if we have input or things to include. I mean, I don't want to put folks, do I need to make live amendments on November 15th if I'm interested in something? What is the, avenue there? I think we haven't, we've talked about the legislative agenda and the idea of like, we need to do it. And now it's just, oh, okay, we're doing it on the 15th. I haven't felt really engaged there.
Yeah, so the reason that I want to get it out, at least a draft out to council as soon as possible, is so that you can do that.
And we would just reply to you via email with things we'd want.
Yeah, and then I'll keep providing iterations as we go forward. The hope there is that by the time we get to a larger discussion, we're close. And at least that we know what changes or adds or takeaways there are. And then if we need to take a meeting or two to discuss it, that's fine. But I want to get us as close as possible, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, I'll adjourn the meeting.